Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, we are going to continue our 2025 update on the boat buying market and how to buy a boat in 2025. If you've joined us the past 2 weeks, we had an episode on financing your Great Loop boat and an episode on surveying prior to the purchase being finalized. Today, we're going to talk with Michael Martin. He is with Great Loop Yacht Sales, and he is an expert in helping Great Loopers find and buy their perfect Great Loop boat. So he's going to give us his insight into the boat buying market for this year. Before we bring Michael into the conversation, I do want to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with that out of the way, I'd like to welcome Michael Martin. He is with Great Loop Yacht Sales, which is an Admiral level sponsor of AGLCA. He has also been a frequent guest on this podcast. So Michael, thanks for being back with us today.
Thank you for the invitation. We appreciate being here to help loopers.
Yeah, it's always popular at the start of the year when we go through kind of an update on the entire boat buying process. So tell us a little bit about yourself to start with, Michael, for those who maybe have not seen or heard you on the podcast before.
Okay. I've been with the AGLCA now for, I think, going on 11 years, specifically focusing on helping loopers buy and sell their Great Loop boats. I'm a platinum looper myself, which means I've done it at least twice, and I'm actually well into my third loop. First one I completed in 16-17, and then the second one completed in 22. After this next cruising season, I'll probably be about 3/4 of the way done with my third loop. So maybe, depending on what the season looks like, we'll close the third one this year. But if not, I'm happy having done it twice and having the experience so that I can help our looper friends as much as possible.
Yeah, and we mentioned that Great Loop Yacht Sales is an Admiral level sponsor, so thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about how Great Loop Yacht Sales came to be.
Yeah, Great Loop Yacht Sales, as I said, we've been doing this for about 11 years. We've started Great Loop Yacht Sales about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, specifically just to have a brokerage that is just nothing but focused on Great Loop Yacht Sales. So helping loopers sell their existing boats while they're transitioning into their Great Loop boat, helping them find their Great Loop boat, helping them sell their Great Loop boat. And then if they're looking to move on to cruising the Bahamas or cruising out west, help them find that next boat as well.
Gotcha. Well, we appreciate that dedication and that focus to the Great Loop. So it is early 2025. It is hard to predict these days, but tell us a little bit about just, kind of a very high level overview of what's expected from the boat buying and selling market for 2025.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year coming up, and that primarily is just because of the change in leadership in the United States. For us people in the United States, it's going to be different here on the ground. Obviously, until we get really into the administration, we don't know how the market's going to react. I can tell you that since 2013, when I started working with loopers, we really have not seen a tremendous slowdown. When COVID first started, we saw a slight slowdown, but then it just went wildfire after that. So we really haven't seen a slowdown. What we have seen a difference in is available inventory. With COVID, a lot of loopers bought their boats, planning to do a 1 or 2 year loop and sell the boat. But with Canada being closed and that being part of the loop that they really wanted to do, they held onto their boats longer. And we really just haven't seen that those loop boats come back onto the market like we were expecting, as well as many years now of hurricane losses where we're losing boats. So inventory is still tough, but We have a lot of aggressive buyers. We have a lot of enthusiastic buyers. We have a lot of good sellers. Just need to, I would say pace yourself a little bit differently when you're in the buying part of this. Loop boats are not as prevalent, I guess, as they used to be. So you just want to make sure that you're giving yourself the right amount of lead time to make your start on your adventure.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that pacing, how to go about finding that boat. We generally try to keep these podcasts to about 30 minutes. So for anybody listening, that's kind of the expectation. If we can't get to everything today, as we announced last week when Scott Miller was with us, all of our presenters on this podcast series to update you for 2025 will be joining us to give live in-person seminars in March in Chattanooga. We've got one of our Great Loop Cruising, a guide to the Looper lifestyle seminars coming up. It's a 2-day seminar that's kind of an introduction to the Great Loop. And we've expanded the agenda there. And thanks to sponsorship from Great Loop Yacht Sales, there is from about 9 to 2 on the first day, it's a workshop on finding and buying your Great Loop boat. So the 4 experts that have been joining us on this podcast series will be there, as I said, giving seminars live and in person. So today is just kind of a taste of what you'll get if you choose to join us there. Michael, you were talking about COVID and how the marketplace for boats just kind of exploded at that time. And 4 or 5 years later, it's hard to still use that as the reason, but for whatever reason, it has continued to be a seller's market, it seems, from a little bit of an outsider's perspective. And it's partly because we're losing boats to hurricanes, etc. So because of that, because, as you said, of inventory being low, a lot of the boats have tended to hold their value if you're buying one that's already had a lot of its depreciation done. So do you expect that to continue into 2025, or do you think we'll start to see that correction that people have been hoping for if you're a buyer for quite some time now?
Yeah, I would love to say I would love to see prices on boats go back down to pre-COVID price ranges. Honestly, I just, with inflation and all the other, market indicators and effectors, I just don't see that happening as quickly as we'd all hope it would. Boat pricing since COVID has become more realistic again. There was a period in time where it was quite out of control and people were getting anything they asked for their boats, which, is not always a good thing, especially when you're trying to put a value on a boat to buy or sell that boat. So we'd love to see it, and it has stabilized. We'd love to see it come back a little bit more towards those pre-COVID prices. But I would say that the seller's market is still it still is favoring sellers, I would say at this point. It's definitely not as strong in the seller's favor, but they are the ones with the boats that our people are looking for. So, that does lead it to be a little bit of more of a seller's market. But it is reasonable. The prices have come back down. In order to make sure that you get a boat, you want to make sure that you buy right. A lot of that is using brokers that you trust, whether it's us or somebody else. You want to make sure that you have representation so that you can be making the best decisions, with a professional out there while you're trying to buy.
Makes sense. And I think one of the things that as a buyer in 2025 you may not be thinking about is that just about everybody is eventually a seller. It's pretty rare that people hold on to these boats until they die and then let their heirs worry about it. So eventually you're going to be a seller. And the time to start to think about that is probably as you're buying. So, tell us about some of the things that loopers in 2025 that are getting ready to buy should consider as they're making that buying decision that's going to help them on the back end when they eventually decide to sell.
Yeah. When I got into doing this in 2013, the loop was very much a 1-year adventure and people were done. I think that has definitely shifted. We're seeing people owning boats a little bit longer than obviously a year. We're seeing people do multiple loops. We're seeing people do more side trips, which are extending their loop to multiple years. But we do preach, to all of our buyers, the first thing that we are thinking about as your broker, and any broker who is working with a looper should be doing, is thinking about their exit strategy. If you were to buy a very popular boat like a main ship, a Meridian, some of the boats that you normally hear about out there on the loop, the chances for a buyer to be there when you're ready to sell that boat are pretty good, especially a loop buyer. Um, Going after a boat that is a custom built boat or a brand that is not really well heard of, or has had some significant issues in the past, can make your exit out of that boat much tougher. So it is absolutely a priority to be thinking about your exit strategy while you're looking at buying the boat.
And of course, along with that, as you said, having a lot of willing buyers when you come off the loop or when you're ready to sell it is good. So looking at the top boat makes that completed the loop in the last few years is important. We do track stats of that for AGLCA, and this still being a little bit early in January, we give people a little bit of time to finish reporting their 2024 completions to us. But at the end of the month, I'm hopeful that we can get you or Brent Bolin, who's your partner with Great Loop Yacht Sales, to join us and talk about when we have the final list of the most popular boat brands or boat makes to finish the loop in 2024. That will also likely help guide some buyers at least into a place to start, but also the popular boats, as you said, that hold their value a little bit better because there's more willing buyers. So look for that coming later this month, and hopefully Great Loop Yacht Sales will help us with that one as well.
Happy to.
So during the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen, a number of looper boats that buy the boat, do the loop, and then sell it with little to no depreciation. Um, Obviously, the key is buying the right brand of boat, as you mentioned, probably the right age of boat. But what do you suggest for somebody who really, wants to come out of this almost an approach, almost as if they were renting a boat for a year, where, when they're done, they sell that asset and maybe there's been a cost of use for that year, but not depreciating much beyond that. What are your thoughts on that as a possibility for people in 2025?
I think that the lack of inventory obviously will still play into their favor when they're looking to sell the boats. Um, Obviously you want to make sure that uh, you're buying the boat right at the right market price, not overpaying for that boat. If you overpay for the boat, chances are you're losing something right off the bat. A example of that is a lot of people get hooked on freshwater boats, that a freshwater boat has to be in better condition than a saltwater boat, blah, 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 blah. Freshwater boats typically do demand a higher premium because they have typically been in storage for 6 months of the year every year, so they're not exposed to the elements as much as a saltwater boat might be. The saltwater itself, people fear, is horribly corrosive, and as long as you're taking care of the boat right, it shouldn't be. But buying a freshwater boat, paying a premium right up front, knowing that you're going to take it into saltwater, you're pretty much losing that premium. So, it's those types of things that you want to really be sure to think about. You want to make sure that you're not doing over the top type, gut the boat and remodel the entire interior. You don't want to change the boat so that it's more of a custom boat than it is a stock boat. You want to make very reasonable upgrades and changes to the boat to make sure that you're not getting too far into the investment where you're not going to get that back out.
Makes sense. Let's take a quick break and play a message from one of our sponsors. When we come back, I kind of want to dive into what you mentioned about kind of changing the time frame that you might be looking at based on how quickly these boats are selling. So we will take a break and we'll be back in a moment. Need strong, reliable cell signal on your next water excursion? Powerful Signal is your one-stop shop for the most powerful cell signal boosters on the market. A cell signal booster is essential while boating, especially in remote or offshore areas where maintaining a reliable cellular connection is crucial for safety, communication, and convenience. With 17 years experience and excellent customer service, Powerful Signal is confident it can help you find the perfect cellular booster kit for your unique situation. We believe in powerful products and powerful connections. Let us help strengthen your signal. Visit powerfulsignal.com or call 435-634-6800 to speak with an expert today. Discover relaxation and pleasure at Saybrook Point Resort and Marina, conveniently situated at the mouth of the Connecticut River on Long Island Sound, just a quick trip off the loop. Only 90 miles from New York City, our marina offers world-class amenities and impeccable service for vessels of any size. Enjoy friendly concierge service, waterfront dining, a hotel, spa, and health club, along with on-site laundry, pick areas, complimentary shuttle and bicycles, and a courtesy car. Saybrook Point Resort and Marina is your destination for provisioning, relaxation, exploration, repairs, and beyond. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. My guest today is Michael Martin. He is one of the founders of Great Loop Yacht Sales. And we are talking today about the boat buying market for 2025 and what buyers can expect if you're looking for a boat this year. So, Michael, we talked about kind of the time frame for buying. We also talked about inventory still being low. So, how far before setting out for the loop, or everybody's kind of got a different time frame of how long they want to have the boat before they take off. So if you want the boat by X date, how far in advance of that date should you really start looking and be prepared to pull the trigger?
Yeah, we've had owners buy the boat, a year out, and people like myself literally bought the boat and left. So it's all over the board. It's really your own comfort level and how much knowledge or experience you have behind you. I would, COVID's a very good example. I would very much suggest and recommend to everybody to not overplan, because we none of us have guarantees. And if you want to do this adventure, do your due diligence, make sure that you're learning and educating yourself as best you can. The rendezvous are obviously one of the best places to do that. But go, get out there and do this. You're going to learn a lot while you're doing it. So don't try and learn everything up front. As for buying the boat and how far out you should, put yourself for that, a lot of that depends on the either uniqueness of the boat, or if the boat is a production boat. If you're looking for something like a Carver, a Sea Ray, a Meridian, even the cruisers and some Silvertons, those boats were made as production boats. They're in somewhat high volumes. So knowing that those boats are out there and there's several to choose from, usually you don't have to plan too far in advance. 3 to 6 months is probably more than enough time to find one of those boats and move that way. If you're looking for something like a Fleming or a DeFever or Katie Krogan, Whaleback, or something that's a little bit more of a, not a custom boat, but a low production boat. They just weren't mass produced. You might have to go out to 6 months to a year looking for a boat like that. It really is dependent on how much the boat was in production and how much it's sought after by other loopers.
Time is kind of everything in this process. So there was a point in time when boats were selling so fast that standard operating procedure became making an offer sight unseen. Dealing with a trusted broker who can put the deposit in escrow until you do have a time to do that personal inspection. So I think, given the times buyers were adapting to that, is that still the way things are typically working? Or has that kind of flipped back to where you are doing a personal inspection with your clients before they make an offer?
I would say it kind of goes back to what I was just talking about with the production boats versus the lower production boats. If you're interested in a DeFever 44, we don't see them come around that often. People usually hold on to them. There are not a ton of them made. So if one comes onto the market, I would probably suggest to a buyer who really wants to go that direction, be ready to make an offer sight unseen with a contingency that we can do a personal inspection within 7 to 10 business days, so that we're not taking the boat off the market, so that it won't scare away the seller from our offer, so that we can get there and see the boat and say, yes, we want to move forward or not. The higher production boats, again, because there were more of them produced, you still may want to be able to do that, put an offer down so that, especially if you've got 3 weeks out of the country coming or something like that, where you're going to be on vacation, you want to be able to put that offer in and not lose the boat necessarily. But again, we're going to want to do the personal inspection in a reasonable amount of time. So With higher production boats, I wouldn't think you would need to do that, but it's always good to have that comfort level to be able to do that.
Yeah, so to that point, to that comfort level, let me just kind of clarify how this would work. If there is a boat that has a listing that you are, thinking perhaps it's the one, your broker can assist you to make an offer sight unseen. At that point, correct me where I go astray here. The buyer is going to send a deposit. It'll go into the broker's escrow account. And the boat does come off the market if the seller accepts that offer. But the reason you said you're probably going to be looking for a personal inspection with 7 to 10 days is because the seller's not going to want the boat off the market for 2 months while you work on getting yourself over there for the personal inspection. Is that all kind of accurate?
Yes, very much so. Go ahead.
But so then you mentioned contingent on the personal inspection. Is there any risk then after the personal inspection, if you get to the boat and it looks nothing like the listing photos? What recourse does the buyer then have to back out of that deal? Do they lose any of the deposit?
Right. And I get that. I get the question quite regularly, obviously, over the last several years where we've been doing this more frequently and more regularly. We've had this conversation with many buyers. You want to make sure that you have a broker that is comfortable with putting an offer in sight unseen. Probably one of the biggest things that you want to make sure as part of your offer is a contingency on a personal inspection within 7 to 10 business days is what I recommend, what I try to, live by. Again, that tends not to scare sellers away and tells them we're serious about, getting there as soon as we can. But you want to make sure that, you are working with a broker that you trust. A lot of the documents say that the escrow will go to the selling broker. Now I'm trying to remember what the wording is. The wording is basically backwards from what you intuitively would think. The broker that you're working with to present the offer is where your deposit should end up. That's the broker you trust. That's the broker you're working with. So you want to make sure that your escrow money is going into that broker's escrow account and that broker is reputable. We haven't really seen a ton of issues with escrow money, but it does happen. So you definitely want to make sure you're working with somebody that you trust and feel comfortable with.
And then
But yes, there's no risk to that escrow money. You can come and do the personal inspection if the boat is not what you expected, if it's not represented correctly, if it smells, if there's just really about anything that, does not make you happy about the boat, you can either renegotiate that offer if the seller will, or you can basically just back out and move on. Your escrow money, deposit money is safe in the escrow account until post-survey. If you make the decision that, yes, I want to buy this boat and I'm telling the seller I want to buy this boat, and then you back out, that's where your deposit becomes at risk.
So
So
as
it's
long as
way
you're
down the road.
right. So if you do the personal inspection, as you said, the boat has an awful odor, you decide it's not the boat for you. Part of the reason you want to make sure that the offer says that the broker representing you will hold that money in escrow is because then it is a very easy transaction for your broker to send that back to you. Correct?
Absolutely.
Sometimes
Absolutely.
you may choose to have the broker hold that for the next deposit you may make. But, back when this first started becoming very commonplace, I had members calling me and saying, my broker's telling me I should do this. And, the key thing I think is really to read the paperwork, but understand that it really is no risk. The paperwork should say that if you reject the boat at that point, you get your full deposit back. The other thing I think, Michael, people often wonder is, we've talked to Scott Miller about the survey. We've talked to him about, the survey findings come back, and it is at that point that there could be some things to renegotiate between the seller and buyer, which their broker should be handling for them. At what point in that process is that deposit gone? If something that was not expected to be found in the survey, if an engine needs to be rebuilt, what risk does the buyer then have for his deposit or her deposit at that point if they've agreed upon a price thinking there were two working engines and there weren't?
If you're referring to getting through survey and having issues, but not have accepted the boat yet,
Mhm.
until you accept the boat in writing, your deposit is fully refundable. If you accept the boat, close on the boat, and decide to, start it up the first day and blow an engine, unfortunately, that is just fate. It's one of those things that none of us can control. But until you have surveyed the boat, gotten all your results back, oil samples, talked with your broker about any kind of conditional acceptance or a full acceptance that you want to do on the boat, until you sign an acceptance for that boat, your deposit money is still safe with your broker.
Excellent. So I think that hopefully will put a lot of people's minds at ease. That the real cost in this process, if you pick the wrong boat and follow it through all the way past survey, the cost is really in the travel you might have done
Yes.
and the cost of the survey, which we
Yes.
talked about with Scott Miller in our previous episode.
Yep.
But so as far as any, deposit money, earnest money, that is all coming back to the seller unless they violate the terms of the paperwork that happens as they're going through. So, it's one of the reasons that we certainly recommend that loopers work with a buyer's broker to represent their interests and make sure that all this paperwork has all the T's crossed and the I's dotted and is written so that it favors the buyer where it should. It's got to be a fair deal, of course, but we always
Yeah.
want to make sure our members deposit money is safe until they've accepted the boat, which is the very last part of the process.
Yeah.
So for those looking to sell in 2025, or even beyond, we may have some people listening who are buying in 2025, but as we said right from the start, exit strategy should be in mind. Any suggestions, what you should do to have the boat ready to sell?
That's the big thing, is really having it ready to sell. I mean, if you um, are going to sell your house, you mow the yard, you weed it, you trim the trees, you do all those things that, number one, make the first bit of curb appealing, obviously, so that when people walk up to the boat, they're not immediately, wondering, has the boat been taken care of, because the gel coat is dull, or it's completely dirty and it looks like it's been sitting for a month. So curb appeal is very important. Beyond that, obviously, you want to make sure that the boat is decluttered as much as you can. Obviously, loopers, a lot of loopers are living aboard their boats full time. Some don't have homes like myself. So, it's the only space we have to clutter. So you want to make sure that you definitely declutter the boat, specifically all horizontal surfaces. Um, Whether that's putting it inside a cabinet, moving it off the boat, whatever that is. I don't necessarily recommend staging a boat, because staging a boat can be misleading in that it hasn't been lived on recently, in that, it's just been sitting. So I think that, letting a buyer see the boat as people are living on it is fine. It just needs to be neatened up. Having a good set of maintenance records, oil samples, everything you've done available for that buyer to look at, for their surveyors to look at, is a huge importance.
Mhm.
You want to make sure that you can prove that during at least your ownership, you've done the right things to take care of the boat. It's always best if that can go many owners back, but sometimes that's just not realistic. So
Yeah.
those are the big things. Just don't over update the boat. Update it to where you're comfortable. Keep it in as good a condition, and you'll likely be able to get out of it with, I would say, a minimal loss if the market stays the same.
Yeah. So this is probably a difficult question, but as far as the updates and things like that, I would say that the average age of a looper boat is probably 20 years or more at this point. Um, And there can be vast differences in 20-year-old boats or 25-year-old boats in their condition and their quality, depending on how the build was, way back when it was first manufactured. But the question is, for buying a boat's a very emotional decision. For loopers, you're probably going to be, spending most of your time aboard, eating, sleeping, everything else for the course of a year or more. And you want it to be beautiful and pristine. How does that work? When you're dealing with a 25-year-old home, it's going to look more different. It's going to look more dated than a brand new build construction if you're looking at a home. But yet you're kind of paying a very hefty price for most of us, budget wise, for a 20 or 25-year-old boat. So how do you align your expectation for wanting it to be beautiful and pretty and everything to be perfect with knowing that it's 25 years old, and that's kind of unlikely that every last piece is going to look brand new? So how do you align that? How do you, kind of set the expectation for your buyers when what they're looking at and what they want is an older boat?
Yeah, and expectation setting is exactly what it is. There's a large group of boats that used to be very popular and still are popular that were built in Asia. The Grand Banks, Albans, Marine Traders. Those used to be the go-to boats. We've kind of now went over, recently, last 10 years, we've moved over to main ships and more fiberglass boats. And now we're, seeing that those boats are actually, beginning to age, obviously, that most of those were late 90s or into the 2010 area. But, they're aging, they're getting higher engine hours and things like that. What I typically tell people, the best approach, in my opinion, and I don't have exact numbers to back this up, but if we're buying a boat from another looper, it tends to be a lot easier process. Boat tends to be in better condition because loopers are actively cruising their boat, actively living on them for 1 or more years, so they know the boats inside and out. Where, somebody who's just, using the boat a couple of weekends a year or half the year up in the north, may not be as familiar with their boat. It may not know all the things that are right and wrong with it. So, or may not maintain it the same way. I like to say loopers live and die by their boats, and I think we really do. Those of us who it's our only home, we want to make sure that it's taken care of, just like we would take care of our home, another asset that has value. So, it's really talking with your broker, um, having your expectation at the right level, and just a conversation with a buyer. I can tell, okay, we need to, go see a couple boats like this to get them to understand why that expectation may be too high, those types of things. Again, looper crawls at the rendezvous are one of the best places to just get on a whole bunch of boats and see them in all their different conditions and ages and all that kind of stuff. So that is definitely a good place to help set expectation. But um, your broker shouldn't be in this just for a paycheck. He should be in this to hopefully help you to find the right boat so that you're happy and you're, promoting that broker and promoting your not necessarily promoting, but just speaking nicely of that broker while you're out there doing the loop, that, that broker really helped you, rein in your expectations, find the right boat, find things that met your criteria, rather than just, do the sale and move on.
One of the things we touched on too with Scott Miller last week about the survey is he talked about the survey report. And, we kind of very briefly touched on the fact that based on what he finds, it's then time perhaps to renegotiate the selling price or work that out. And we both agreed that that was the time to bounce that back to your broker. Because if you have a thorough surveyor like Scott, who does a thorough report, there could be pages and pages and pages of stuff that he's telling you are not working on the boat, but some of that may be absolutely normal for a 20-year-old boat. So that's the time to go back to your broker, look at the survey with them, let them kind of tell you exactly what is a concern and what is because you're looking at a 25 or 30-year-old boat. So use your broker. That's what they're there for, and they have a wealth of experience that can help you. Michael, you mentioned our looper crawls. Thank you for that. Those, of course, happen at our rendezvous. really the best way to get a feel for what kind of boat you're looking for is to be able to climb on a bunch of them. And the rendezvous are a great place to do that. However, outside of our rendezvous, some of our members are coming from landlocked areas. Some are coming from places where there's just not a whole lot of boats on the market. And some of them don't want to, call a local broker and waste their time climbing on local boats just for an experience, if that's really not something that they're serious about. So, it basically comes down to most of us who are looking for a boat are doing a good bit of online shopping first. And hopefully their broker is doing that with them as well. But so what are some of the places that it's best to look for a boat and kind of, help your broker work together to figure out what kind of boats you might be interested in?
Yes, the obviously getting on boats is there's no substitute for that. What I have found over the years working with loopers is that it has been very successful if we can have a dialogue back and forth with boats that are on the web, on the internet, even if they haven't been on board those boats yet. If they tell me, I really like this galley in this boat, or I like this master stateroom, or I like the fact that there's minimal amounts of stairs, and send me links to boats, and I do the same thing. What about this? It has a similar galley, or it has a similar, layout or whatever. The going back and forth like that with links and discussing the different aspects and layouts and just features is what I found has worked best to minimize everybody's travel time and time on the ground, just seeing any boat they can get on, because that's not that easy for any of us. Especially if you're not local to the Great Loop area, it's going to be very hard to see looper boats, that are moving around that area. But yeah, I would definitely say, using Yacht World, other popular boat searches, Boat Trader, boats.com, Yacht there's a number of different companies out there that are MLSs for just boats, boat links to boats. Share those with your brokers. Tell him or her what you like or don't like, even if it's just a specific room or a specific feature. Within a couple of back and forths with my clients, I can usually say, okay, I have a good idea of what you're looking for. How about this, or this? And then we've kind of narrowed it down from any boat that's out there to these few that we can then start focusing our energy and time and money on to then get on board. If by chance those two or three still don't meet it, we go back to the drawing board and circle back and see what didn't we like about those, and what are the next boats we want to look at.
Yeah, we've pretty much hit our usual time goal is about 30 minutes. We have barely scratched the surface of this topic because there is a lot to the process of buying a boat. We hope that many of you are intrigued enough to join us in Chattanooga, March 28th and 29th. The first day is the first part of the first day for about 5 hours or so is a boat buying workshop. Michael will be there to present, and Michael's company, Great Loop Yacht Sales, is sponsoring that event so that we can include lunch and make that part of the event free. The rest of the seminar, it happens in the afternoon on the 28th and all day on the 29th, and it's an introduction to the Great Loop. We'll bring in lots of gold loopers to tell you the story of their loop. We'll talk about anchoring. We've got the agenda is on the website. So go to greatloop.org and hit the event menu and you'll see the Chattanooga Looper Lifestyle Seminar listed there. Hopefully some of you will join us. We'll cover a lot more there. We can't possibly do it all today, but one of the things, Michael, I feel like for those kind of new to this process and haven't considered a buyer's broker, a question that is begging to be answered that people are probably wondering is, what's the cost of having a buyer's broker represent you?
Yeah, a buyer's broker basically is somebody who is going to work in your best interest, obviously, preview boats for you, help you in that process of eliminating boats and finding the right boat. As long as the boat is a typically, brokered boat where the seller is usually paying the commission on those boats, there's no cost for our service as a buyer's broker to work with you and try and find, the right boat for you. If there's a very unique boat that you're interested in, a low production boat, a defeater, whatever the case may be, that's a for sale by owner. That does not have typically the same commission structure as a brokered boat. So that may be a chance, there may be a chance there that you might have additional fees on top of paying our commission, if the sellers won't chip in, to help do that. But in most cases of a brokered boat, there's very little cost for our services to you. We're traveling anyways, pretty much constantly, to list boats, see boats, survey boats, show boats. So one of us working it into our schedule to see a boat in Maryland or Florida or Texas typically does not take long, and we can get on board and see that boat for you and help you, know whether it's a boat you want to pursue or not. But again, those are things that we do just because we're already out there doing that. So, talk to your broker, ask him how he approaches the buyer broker function, and make sure that he's going to take care of you the way you should be taken care of.
Yeah, but the typical, most of the time it's the typical commission structure. So just to make sure everybody's clear, what is the typical commission structure, and how are you getting paid if you're doing all this travel and not being compensated by the buyer that you're representing?
Yeah, the industry standard is still 10% commission. That is split by brokerages. So if myself and another broker is working the deal from both buying and selling side, obviously that 10% is split between the two brokerages and then split between the two brokers. So that is where our fee is paid for, travel expenses and things like that. We have had people come to us, buyers come to us and say, I want to pay, for your time. My usual response back to that is, if you're looking for a standard boat that we can get in a standard way, with a standard commission, there's no need for that. So, again, it goes more to those special circumstances where it may be a for sale by owner, or there are some brokers out there who won't work with other brokers, but you still might want the boat that they have for sale. Then we got to, work through that and talk about how we're gonna deal with that.
Gotcha. Michael, thank you for being with us. Thanks for sharing all this information. I appreciate your wealth of knowledge in this, and we know you'll be sharing it more at our upcoming seminar, but also you've been a frequent guest here, so I'm sure we'll be having you back sometime soon. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And to everyone who's watched or listened this week, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.